Transference happens when the feelings someone had toward important people from their past, like parents, teachers, or caregivers, automatically get transferred onto authority figures in their present life. Think of it like this. The mind creates blueprints of relationships based on early experiences, and these blueprints get pulled out and used again whenever someone encounters a similar type of person. A strict father from childhood can unconsciously influence how someone reacts to their boss today. A demanding teacher from school might shape how they respond to their supervisor now. The key word here is unconsciously. People don't realize this is happening. The reason this happens is actually quite practical from the mind's perspective. Instead of starting fresh with every new authority figure, the brain saves energy by using existing relationship templates. When someone experienced their parents' love as conditional, only given when they performed well, their mind files this pattern away. Years later, when their manager schedules a performance review, that same anxiety and need for approval gets triggered. The employee might feel overwhelming fear or resentment that seems way too intense for the situation, but that's because their unconscious mind is mixing up the past with the present, treating their boss like their demanding parent. Freud noticed that people tend to repeat these patterns whether they want to or not. Someone who felt constantly criticized as a child might unconsciously gravitate toward critical bosses, or they might interpret neutral feedback as personal attacks. On the flip side, someone who had overly permissive parents might put their managers on pedestals and give them too much power over their self-worth. This creates a pattern where authority figures are either idealized as perfect or eventually seen as terrible disappointments. First, the boss can do no wrong and deserves total devotion. Later, when they show normal human flaws, they become the enemy who betrayed trust. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Transference actually provides valuable clues about unresolved issues from the past that could be worked through. But when someone doesn't realize it's happening, it creates problems. An employee might feel inexplicably threatened by helpful suggestions, or might fail to recognize genuine support. A student could resist good advice from a mentor because it unconsciously reminds them of a harsh teacher from their past. Over time, these misunderstandings damage relationships and hold back professional growth because the person is fighting old battles instead of dealing with present reality. There are 3 clear signs that transference is at work. First, emotional reactions feel way bigger than the situation warrants. A simple request from a boss triggers panic that would be more appropriate for a life-threatening emergency. Second, people start assuming they know what the authority figure is thinking, usually projecting their own insecurities onto them. They might think, "My supervisor thinks I'm incompetent," when there's no evidence for this. Third, logical thinking doesn't help calm these reactions because they're coming from old emotional memories, not current facts. Transference typically unfolds in predictable stages. It starts with strong feelings toward the authority figure, either really admiring them or feeling unusually compliant. This reflects an unconscious hope of getting the security or approval that was missing in childhood. Next comes disappointment when the authority figure doesn't meet unrealistic expectations or gives challenging feedback. During this phase, blame gets projected onto the boss. They're labeled as unfair or tyrannical, reflecting the complaints someone might have had about a parent. Finally, the relationship might deteriorate completely, with the person pulling away or openly rebelling, essentially recreating the same childhood break that happened years ago. Here's the important part. Authority figures aren't actually causing these intense reactions, they're just triggering them. The real source of the emotional intensity comes from those old relationship templates stored in the unconscious mind. When a manager uses the same tone of voice as a critical parent once did, the unconscious connects the 2 experiences, setting off a chain reaction of old defense mechanisms. Someone might deny their hurt feelings, blame the boss for their own insecurities, or take out their frustration on co-workers instead. Freud discovered that bringing these patterns into conscious awareness has incredible healing power. In therapy, patients would react to their therapist the same way they once reacted to important figures from their past, which allowed them to explore and resolve old conflicts. The same principle applies to authority issues outside therapy. When someone recognizes that their intense feelings toward their boss actually stem from their relationship with a critical parent, everything changes. The blame shifts away from the current boss and toward the outdated internal blueprint that's causing the problem. Once someone understands transference, authority relationships can actually become opportunities for healing. A supervisor who gives balanced, helpful feedback can provide a corrective experience that challenges old assumptions about authority. Each positive interaction gradually updates those old relationship templates, weakening their power. Over time, the adult mind learns to separate past from present, reducing the tendency to project childhood dynamics onto current authority figures. Understanding transference helps explain why some workplace conflicts feel so emotionally charged and why logical solutions sometimes fail. Those intense reactions, distorted assumptions, and stubborn resistance to reason all make sense when viewed as unconscious attempts to resolve old relationship patterns. Recognizing this dynamic is the first step toward breaking free from these automatic reactions and building authentic adult relationships with authority figures based on who they actually are, not who they unconsciously represent from the past. Understanding why authority figures in our lives, like bosses or teachers, trigger such strong emotions starts with recognizing that we're not just reacting to them as they are in the moment. Instead, we're responding to a whole set of feelings and memories from our past. This happens because our unconscious mind uses these authority figures as stand-ins for people who had authority over us during our formative years, especially parents or caregivers. When someone steps into a role reminiscent of those childhood figures, our deep-seated feelings, sometimes unresolved, bubble to the surface, and we react as if we're reliving those earlier experiences, even though the current authority figure may have little to do with those original feelings. For example, an employee might feel anxious or defensive whenever a manager gives feedback, not simply because of the feedback itself, but because it reminds them of a critical parent who made them feel judged or inadequate as a child. This emotional response isn't about the boss's actual behavior, but about old wounds that remain open beneath the surface. Similarly, a student who resists instruction or struggles with authority sometimes channels feelings toward a strict teacher from their past, replaying old struggles with control and independence. This process is known as projection, where we attribute our own feelings, desires, or fears onto the authority figure. Imagine someone who fears they aren't good enough carries that anxiety with them unconsciously. When their supervisor makes a simple suggestion, they might perceive it as harsh criticism or personal attack, although the real source of the discomfort lies within their own self-doubt. Projection keeps us from seeing authority figures clearly and can lead to misunderstandings and conflicts that feel irrational or out of proportion. Another common experience is that we might idealize certain authority figures, placing them on a pedestal and believing they hold all the answers or power. This idolization often reflects unconscious longing for the safety and approval we hoped for, but didn't fully experience in childhood. Later, however, when the authority figure fails to meet these inflated expectations, as every human inevitably does, we feel betrayed or deeply disappointed. This cycle of idealization and disappointment mirrors early attachment experiences where caregivers were inconsistently loving or available. Schools and workplaces can be grounds where these dynamics play out vividly. A supervisor's neutral intention can be misread as controlling or dismissive. A teacher's concern could be perceived as nitpicking or unfair judgment. These unconscious reenactments sow confusion and mistrust, making it hard to form authentic relationships with authority. It is important to emphasize that these reactions are normal and universal. Everyone carries internalized images of authority from early experiences, and these shape their adult interactions. The challenge lies in developing awareness of when past and present merge, so we don't keep reacting as if stuck in childhood. Recognizing these patterns opens the door to more conscious engagement. Instead of feeling helpless in the face of authority, individuals can begin to separate present reality from old emotional templates. They learn to question whether their feelings actually stem from the person in front of them, or from old memories projected onto that person. This shift creates space for genuine understanding, improved communication, and healthier boundaries with authority figures in both personal and professional settings. The next step in this journey involves becoming aware of the unconscious forces at work and learning to reclaim one's own power within these relationships. This means moving beyond projection and idealization toward a more balanced, adult perception of authority, acknowledging both strengths and limitations. Doing so reduces conflict and opens the possibility of authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than unconscious scripts. Recognizing the ways in which we project our own feelings, fears, or expectations onto our authority figures is key to understanding and eventually overcoming authority issues governed by transference. Projection is an unconscious defense mechanism where suppressed impulses or emotions are attributed to another person. When it comes to bosses, teachers, or other figures of authority, projection can take many forms, shaping the way we perceive and react to them, typically in ways that are more about us than about the authority figure themselves. For example, an employee who lacks confidence may project feelings of inadequacy onto a critical manager, interpreting their feedback as harsh personal judgments rather than constructive guidance. In reality, the manager's intent might be to support growth, but the employee's own internalized fear colors the perception. This distortion causes frustration and conflict that spring not from reality but from internal projections. Projection often arises when unresolved feelings from important past relationships, especially with caregivers, remain unacknowledged or disowned. If a person grew up with a dominant, critical parent, they might find that authority figures today seem overly controlling or judgmental, echoing that parental voice. They may unconsciously attribute their own feelings of powerlessness, anger, or even cruelty to the boss or teacher. This process obscures their own emotions and blocks authentic interaction, locking the person into a defensive posture. Conversely, an individual might project positive qualities, creating an idealized image of authority figures that eclipses realistic appraisal. This idealization can cause disappointment and disillusionment when expectations go unmet. For instance, a student who views a professor as infallible may feel betrayed or disheartened by constructive criticism, not realizing that the critique is an opportunity for growth rather than rejection. Idealization and projection often function together, weaving a complicated emotional web that makes genuine connection elusive. These unconscious projections also affect behavior. A person may act toward an authority figure in ways shaped more by past fears or desires than by present circumstances. They might avoid eye contact, become overly compliant, or alternatively rebel against perceived threats that are not real. These behaviors perpetuate misunderstandings and reinforce the emotional charge associated with authority. Importantly, recognizing projection requires honest self-reflection and curiosity. A useful technique is to pause when experiencing a strong emotional reaction to a boss or teacher and ask, is it possible that part of what I feel is coming from within me rather than from this person? Journaling these reactions, including triggers and thoughts, helps identify recurring themes and defense patterns. Another helpful approach is the double perspective technique, considering how the authority figure might perceive the interaction differently. This exercise challenges the assumption that our interpretation is automatically accurate and reduces rigid projections. It promotes empathy and opens communication, fostering improved relationships. Projection is common in many hierarchical relationships, but becomes problematic only when it seriously distorts perception and behavior. Awareness of these unconscious filters is the first step to breaking free from their grip. As projections lose their unconscious power, interactions with authority figures gain clarity and authenticity, reducing conflict and anxiety. Freud's concept of working through these projections in therapy, examining and resolving them, remains applicable beyond the consulting room. Individuals can learn to see authority figures as themselves, not as placeholders for past experiences. This shift facilitates healthier relationships based on mutual respect and genuine understanding. Awareness of projection does not mean denying genuine grievances or frustrations. Rather, it allows separating those real concerns from emotional exaggerations born in the past. With this clarity, one can address issues constructively rather than reacting defensively based on unconscious bias. Ultimately, freeing oneself from projection onto authority figures empowers greater personal agency. It transforms the relationship from a battleground where past wounds replay into a space of dialogue, learning, and leadership grounded in present reality. This transformation is essential for both personal growth and professional success. Understanding your personal history with authority is a critical step in recognizing and overcoming transference issues. Often, the feelings you experience toward your current bosses, teachers, or mentors echo emotions you first felt toward key authority figures in childhood. Taking time to explore these early relationships can uncover patterns that have shaped how you respond to authority throughout your life. Start by reflecting on your earliest memories of authority figures. Consider your parents or caregivers. How did they express love or discipline? Were they warm and supportive, or distant and critical? Were they consistent or unpredictable? Often, our unconscious internalizes these early experiences and carries them forward as templates with which we engage the world. If your caregivers imposed strict rules or withheld affection, you might unconsciously expect similar treatment from your current authorities. Next, expand your reflection to include teachers or coaches during your school years. Teachers play a major role in how authority is experienced outside the home, and especially for those with difficult family dynamics. A strict teacher might have reinforced feelings of anxiety or vulnerability. Conversely, a very permissive or disorganized authority figure might have sown confusion or an inability to trust those in power. Your emotional responses to existing bosses can echo these formative experiences, without you realizing it. Keeping a journal of your emotional reactions during interactions with authority figures can be revealing. Note moments when you feel unusually defensive, anxious, or angry towards a manager or mentor. Then trace those feelings back to possible childhood echoes. For example, a fear of failure triggered during a performance review might reflect early experiences of conditional love, when affection was only given based on success. Recognizing these connections helps you understand the why behind your reactions. Talk with trusted friends or family members about your experiences. Sometimes those closest to us hold perspectives about our history that we miss. They might recall how you reacted to authority in the past and help you see parallels to current struggles. These conversations can fill gaps in memory and give a more rounded picture of your relational history. Additionally, seeking professional counseling or coaching can be beneficial. A skilled therapist can guide you through your authority history with sensitivity, helping unearth unconscious material that fuels your transference. They can also support you as you examine your emotional patterns with current authorities, providing feedback and strategies for change. By mapping out your personal authority history, you not only gain insight into your unconscious responses, but also empower yourself to break free from outdated scripts. This process creates the foundation for healthier, more balanced relationships with authority figures in all areas of life. Reclaiming personal power from the hold of unconscious transference takes dedication and practical strategies grounded in self-awareness and conscious choice. The first step toward breaking free is developing a clear sense of one's own authority and boundaries. This begins with recognizing that authority figures, whether bosses or teachers, do not hold absolute power over one's self-worth or emotional well-being. The individual learns to separate the person from the symbolic role they represent in the unconscious, reclaiming ownership of emotions and responses. This differentiation lays the structural foundation for personal power. One powerful method involves conscious reflection on authority interactions paired with journaling. Whenever feelings of overwhelm, resentment, or fear arise toward an authority figure, pause and note the exact thoughts and bodily sensations. Ask questions like, what past experience might these feelings be connected to? And what expectations am I unconsciously projecting? Writing candid responses down externalizes the inner dialogue and allows objective analysis. Over time, this process weakens the grip of transference by making unconscious material accessible and manageable through the conscious mind. Practice asserting boundaries with confidence. Begin by clearly defining what is acceptable behavior toward oneself and what is not. For example, refusing to accept disrespectful speech or unfair criticism is an act of self-empowerment. Role-play such boundary-setting statements before raising them in real interactions. Frequently, authority figures respond better to calm, direct communication than expected, and this reinforces personal agency and disrupts the dynamic of fearful compliance or rebellious projection. Building emotional regulation skills is essential. Transference often triggers strong emotional reactions before the rational mind can intervene. Mindfulness techniques focusing on breath, grounding sensations, or noticing thoughts without judgment calm the nervous system and create a pause between stimulus and response. This pause allows conscious choice to override automatic reactions based on past trauma. Regular mindfulness practice strengthens the ego's capacity to mediate emotional upheaval elicited by authority challenges. An additional step is cultivating social support networks. Sharing experiences with trusted colleagues, mentors, or friends provides perspective and validation, mitigating isolation. Hearing others' stories of authority struggles normalizes the experience and reduces shame. Supportive peers can offer alternative interpretations and encourage assertive behavior, reinforcing personal empowerment. Some find it helpful to engage in therapy or coaching to explore deep transference patterns. In a safe therapeutic environment, individuals dissect their authority history, uncover hidden beliefs, and experiment with new relational responses. Psychodynamic therapy offers tools for working through transference, gradually transforming unconscious scripts and establishing healthier authority dynamics outside the therapy room. Coaching can support practical implementation of assertiveness and boundary setting in real-world settings. Symbolic practices also empower reclaiming authority. Creating personal rituals, such as writing affirmations about one's right to respect and autonomy, visualizing standing confidently before authority figures, or engaging in creative expression that embodies strength, reinforce the internalization of personal power. These rituals communicate to the unconscious mind that the individual intends to rewrite the authority narrative. Finally, cultivating patience and self-compassion is vital. The pull of transference is deeply embedded and resistant to change. Relapses into old patterns may occur, but they provide valuable opportunities for learning rather than evidence of failure. Viewing the process as a gradual unfolding rather than instant transformation encourages persistence and kindness toward oneself. Through these steps, distinguishing person from role, reflective journaling, assertive boundary setting, emotional regulation, social support, therapeutic exploration, symbolic rituals, and self-compassion, individuals can dismantle the unconscious authority scripts that have shaped their personal and professional lives. In reclaiming personal power, the relationship with authority becomes one of mutual respect rather than fear or rebellion, leading to healthier, more authentic connections and greater psychological freedom.